Welcome back everybody to this series of videos about Orlando Furioso. Here is my Italian copy. Today we're going to read Canto 11 of Orlando Furioso with its 82 stanzas. It's actually one of the long cantos, also because of the different scenes, the multiple scenes that it contains. And I would say arbitrarily, I would probably suggest a division of this canto in about 6 different parts, because I can see 6 different scenes in the canto. I have my own favorites. The first part goes until stanza number 9, and if we had to title this part, I would title it Ruggero hugging himself, because he's trying to catch Angelica, but she's invisible thanks to her ring, and therefore he's just ending up hugging himself. I really love a joke that Ariosto is including at the beginning of stanza 9. I'm going to read the first 4 lines of stanza 9. They go: Così dicendo, intorno alla fontana, brancolando n'andava come cieco. Oh, quante volte abbracciò l'aria vana, sperando la donzella abbracciar seco. Cieco means blind in Italian, and abbracciar seco is hugging himself. So really fun conclusion of this first canto. And the theme, let's say the central theme of this part, and maybe of the entire canto here, is that of irresistible desire. This is why the first 2 stanzas of the canto, where usually Ariosto gives us his own abstract and theoretical thinking, are about this topic of desire, and how even if Ruggero is one of our heroes and is still in love with Bradamante, even he cannot resist the beauty of Angelica. Just like the philosopher Xenocrates, who in history or legend was not able to resist the beauty of Phryne. Phryne was supposed to be, or maybe she was, the most notorious courtesan in the Athens of the 4th century before Christ. By the way, something that I've always found quite odd, or maybe even ironic, is that in this poem where Angelica, she's representing beauty, she's almost idealized as an object of desire, the desire of all the knights. She's actually a woman from Katai, so she's supposed to be Asian, maybe Chinese in Ariosto's imagination. The second part of the canto could be titled Angelica Running Away, and that goes from stanza number 9 until the end of stanza number 12. In fact, we have Angelica running away thanks to the ring of invisibility, and protected by this cloak of invisibility, she finds something like a barn where a shepherd or an old man is keeping horses. And she decides to spend the night there. This is where we actually leave Angelica, and we're gonna have many other plots to follow before we see her again. We can call the third part of the canto Ruggero finds Bradamante, and this goes from stanza number 13 until pretty much the middle of stanza 21. We have Ruggero reappearing on the scene and realizing that he's been wasting time trying to find Angelica. He turns around and he notices that his hippogriff has left, so he is doubly scorned in this moment. He's walking around trying to find his way back, and along the way he hears some sounds, some noises of a battle, and there's a battle that he can see from in the woods between 2 particular knights. One of them is a giant, the other one looks regular. I want to read you the first lines of stanza number 17. E questo con lo scudo e con la spada, di qua di là saltando, si difende, perché la mazza sopra non gli cada, con che il gigante a 2 man sempre offende. Ariosto is so great at giving us this quick glimpses of action scenes. He's very good at describing action. For contemporary writers and authors, I'm thinking of somebody who writes in a similarly, let's say, maybe superficial way, meaning that he doesn't go too much in depth, but he is a master of action. It could be somebody like, for example, Ken Follett or Wilbur Smith. Ariosto has even more, I think, strength and intensity in his choice of language and in how synthetic he can be. At a certain point, the giant knight is winning the battle and is taking the helmet off of the other knight to finish him, to kill him. And in that moment, Ruggero can see his or her face. In fact, he notices that it's actually Bradamante. So immediately Ruggero jumps in the fight, and the giant decides to take Bradamante on his back and run away. And we leave these three running and chasing each other in this way. In the middle of stanza 21, Ariosto stops and abruptly and just moves on to yet another subplot or another different scene. I think this canto is particularly fast and speedy and quick, at least compared to the other cantos that we read so far. He keeps moving to the point that at mid-stanza he really says, enough of this, let's talk about something else, which is Orlando. And he moves us to, in fact, the fourth part of the canto, which I think can go from the middle of stanza 21 until the middle of stanza 28, because these are all stanzas that have to do with the topic of weaponry, of new weaponry, which is a big concern in Ariosto's times, at the beginning of the 16th century, in Italy, but all across Europe. If we think about the 80s, and how the topic of nuclear bombs and the armaments was permeating the air, and everybody was talking about that because of the fear. Something similar was happening in the courts in Ariosto's times about these new cannons, the rifles, the guns that were being created in those times and used in battle. So this is why it was an interesting topic for Ariosto's readers and for Ariosto himself. There is one particular stanza that I find really intense and perfect to express not only the danger of using these particularly powerful weapons in battle, but also the human danger of rejecting and almost neglecting all the values of the knighthood that were being lost already back then with the advent of this type of weaponry. Ariosto says in stanza 26, Come trovasti, o scellerata e brutta, invenzion mai loco in uman core? Per te la militar gloria è distrutta, per te il mestier dell'arme è senza onore. Honor, this value that Ariosto felt was, and many people in his times, was being lost with these new types of weapons. And why does Ariosto in stanza 27 hint at the fact that Italy has been more let's say, suffering from the presence of this terrible new weaponry than other countries? The reason is that in the beginning of the 16th century, so many wars and battles were fought between the French king and the German emperor. We're talking about Francis I of France and Charles V of Germany. They kept having battles with each other, and unfortunately for Italy was chosen very often as the battlefield, as the place where they had their conflicts. In fact, between 1521 and 1544, at least 4 conflicts between these two sides took place in Italy. So this is what Ariosto is referring to in stanza 27. From the middle of stanza 28 until stanza 54, we have probably the strongest action scene of this canto, and one of the strongest action scenes of the entire poem. It's a lot of fun, it's very entertaining. We have the fight of Orlando with the sea monster, so we can call this part Orlando and the sea monster. Within this fifth part of the canto, I think stanza number 37 is a lot of fun, so I'm going to read it briefly for you. It goes: Tosto che l'orca s'accostò e scoperse nel schifo Orlando con poco intervallo, per inghiottirlo tanta bocca aperse che entrato un uomo vi saria a cavallo. This mouth was so big that a man with his horse could have just entered the mouth of the monster. Si spinse Orlando innanzi e se gli immerse con quella ancora in gola, e s'io non fallo, col battello anco, e l'ancora attaccolle e nel palato e nella lingua molle. This is the strategy that Orlando uses to defeat the monster, to use this anchor and to infix it in the monster's mouth. So the sixth and final part starts with stanza 54 and goes until the end. When in this final part we see Olympia and Oberto. Orlando was hoping that the woman that he had seen chained to a tree next to the coast was in fact Angelica, but it wasn't her, because we know that Ruggiero already took Angelica away from this island. And Oberto comes. Oberto is the king of Ireland, who with his army has come to defeat these Ebuda islanders. In fact, they are completely destroyed, and his army kills all of them. And following different ancient myths, but in particular the myth of Ariadne and Dionysus, where Dionysus had freed Ariadne and he had fallen in love with her and then married her. The story follows that kind of blueprint, and we have Oberto falling in love with Olympia and taking her as his wife. Towards the end, then we learn that Oberto goes to the Netherlands, defeats Bireno, he kills Bireno, and there is a certain happy ever after of Oberto and Olympia. But this actually leaves Orlando still to his destiny, because he hasn't found Angelica, and his purpose, his goal in life has not been fulfilled yet. So he's still traveling. He goes back to the port of Saint-Malo in France, and Ariosto says that there follows a winter in which Orlando, as always, he had many adventures, and we can say that he did many good things, many knightly things and actions. However, he still has not found Angelica. The canto ends with yet another cliffhanger, as almost always these cantos end, where Ariosto says, I'm going to read the very final 4 lines of the last stanza. Spinge il cavallo e piglia il brando fido, e donde viene il suon ratto s'invia. Ma differisco un'altra volta a dire, quel che seguì se mi vorrete udire. If you want to listen to me, if you want to keep reading Orlando Ariosto with Ariosto and with myself, I'll see you next with Canto number 12. Thank you so much for watching.